Mentally conscious today. To recycle your newspapers, bottles and cans? Sure. But what about massive construction materials designed for a single purpose? What happens when the job is done? With construction waste consuming 25% of our landfills, is there not a better way to adapt and reuse our engineering marvels? Perhaps the way we think is what needs to be discarded.
Well, the Big Dig was an idea that was hatched back in the early 1980s. The idea was that the elevated central artery, which was built in the 1950s and wound its way through the heart of downtown Boston, was getting old, it was falling apart, and it was overburdened with traffic. So what to do with it? Well, you could rebuild it, or you could put it underground. So that was the basic idea. Put it underground and demolish the elevated artery and put parks and development and new public space there.
This job wasn't just a tunnel. It was building a tunnel through the most densely populated part of Boston, certainly the most valuable real estate in Boston, doing it through corridors of utilities that are mind-boggling, doing it at the same time using the structural elements of the new tunnel to hold up the old elevated highways as it was still being used above. It was an incredible task.
Now, 20 years later, it went from an original price tag of about $2.8 billion to the current $14.6 billion. So it became a very expensive project to build, and there's a lot of cynicism because of the problems, because it took so long and it cost more than they said it was going to.
I think the Big Dig started off with a bang, and the enthusiasm for the project has waned the last few years, but we're really in the finishing stages now, and I think the enduring legacy of the Big Dig, we're already seeing it in that it's improved transportation in the city, I think dramatically, at least from my perspective. And once the parks are open and the green spaces have been completed, I think the whole affinity for the Big Dig will become much stronger.
Years from now, when that greenway is finished, I think it's going to be pretty inspiring, and Boston is going to be a really special place with that kind of public space and park. But was that worth $14 billion?
Not to mention the waste from demolished buildings, bridges, and temporary highways. The dismantled central artery produced 20,000 tons of concrete and more than 38,000 tons of steel. Who on earth would find this inspiring?
I've been on the project for 11 years, so my job actually changed over the course of that time. I started out as a project manager running a single project, which was one of the first tunnel sections. But over the last 8 or 9 years, I've been a vice president of one of the major construction companies in the project. Well, anytime your project is a federally funded transportation project, there's certain standards that have to be met. Obviously, if it's going to be a bridge, it's going to carry passengers every day. It has to be the best there is. And the scrutiny that the materials receive when they're being manufactured is it's so intense that it guarantees it's the best material you can buy. That's all the more reason that it should be available for reuse, because it's great stuff, and it's built to last a long time. These slabs are Inverset slabs. They're specially fabricated for use in temporary structures. When you want to build a bridge quickly, you incorporate the steel beams into the pouring of these concrete slabs, and they could be assembled in short order when you want to build a temporary structure like the ones we use in the central artery. They suggested that we take the last 40 or 50 panels and break them up, basically crush them up and destroy them. And I asked if we could take possession of them rather than get paid to crush them up. And the state agreed, and they asked me in the meeting, what are you going to do with the last few panels? And I told them I was going to build a house, and everybody in the room started laughing. But I wasn't. I was serious, and the design of the house started to take shape that day. I knew that I needed someone with an eye to help put together, especially the exterior, and help me with the layout. And I really wasn't looking for the architect when I found him. I was looking for a piece of land. I'd pick a spot of town and I'd run up and down the streets just looking for a vacant lot or a for sale sign. And I was running through Cambridgeport one day, and I turned the corner and I saw this fantastic minimalist house. I mean, it was just something you don't see in Cambridge very often. So I saw the name on the sign out front, and when I got home I emailed Single Speed Design. I referred to it as Junkyard Wars meets Habitat for Humanity. And when he first read it, he thought it was a prank. And I think he was a little bit tentative on responding, but he eventually did. And I invited him down to my office, and we went for a walk through the junk pile.
He did invite us over to see the stuff, junk that he calls it. He said he's a professional junk collector. I mean, it was definitely piles of steel and concrete that were formless at that point, and they were obviously dismantled. And it was fun looking at things, and he was very well versed in their technical abilities. Like, this beam can span this amount of distance, this slab can hold this much. So it was actually very exciting to not see this stuff as junk, but to see it as potential.
We asked Paul can you put this thing in the top, or how much this thing can support, and it's a simultaneous like a brainstorming.
The potential of 2-ton concrete slabs and massive structural steel beams, once considered waste, quickly became a thing of beauty. Or so they thought.
The only people that seemed excited about it was Paul and us.
Yeah, because we showed many people, because we were excited about it. But then the reaction was just pure skepticism.
The thing that struck me was when I was dealing with the financial institutions, when I first went for a loan, they were only willing to give me half of what I ultimately received because they doubted the marketability of this type of a house. They were nervous about the contemporary look of it to begin with, but when I mentioned that it was going to be built from recycled materials, their interest levels just went right down.
Real estate people say you should never be the first guy on the block, in terms of renovating or starting a new idea. But architects who innovate, they're always the first guy on the block. They're always the early proposers and early adapters. And they suffer, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune as a result. But they're dogged, too. They're on a mission.
So I redoubled my efforts on finding real estate. And we were lucky. We stumbled in on a piece where the house is located right now. And here, we were lucky enough that not only was a contemporary, not something that was against the local aesthetic, there was a covenant on the site, on the parcel of land, which dictated that a contemporary had to be built. So we were really happy. We moved pretty quickly on it.
Six Moon Hill is a neighborhood created in 1947, dedicated to modernist ideals. The question is, do those ideals still invite innovation and boldness?
What you've got is a small group of people who trained with Walter Gropius, who went into a neighborhood, got some land, and said, we really want to make not a house, but a neighborhood, and that's going to be a model for a way to live. And in this way, it harkens both to very profound and deep threads in American culture that have to do with utopianism.
I went for an individual meeting with the then chairman of the Moon Hill community, Dick Morehouse, and he was really a wonderful man, and he brought me in his house, and he looked at the plans, and as a professional architect who designed his own monorail house, after looking at the plans, he said, "That's lovely, and I'm very excited, but you'll never build that here in a million years." So we took that as a no, and we went back to the drawing board, and we tried to look at what they would want as we thought, what were the elements of the Bauhaus that they would want us to replicate.
They wanted us to actually follow the 40s and 50s aesthetic, and the only exposed structure they wanted us to show were 6-inch round metal columns. We don't have any of those in our building, so that was it.
We decided we're not going to give up. We'll go back and we'll change it. In fact, John and Ginny, I believe, came up and drove around the neighborhood and picked off key aesthetic features of the other houses and came back with a design that was eventually accepted.
Structurally, I think we did push the envelope as much as we could. One of the things that we were free to do on this house was that the exterior wall doesn't have to bear any weight, because the weight is, of course, the highway pieces on the columns. So there was a lot of freedom in the exterior way we made openings.
The thing that I wanted to do with the house, and I think John and Ginny and eventually Christina all agreed on, was that we would try to make as big a space as we could. We really wanted to try to utilize the materials, the best characteristics of the materials, which allow you to do big open spaces.
So we want to bring in like an airy feeling inside, and the site is really well preserved actually. So there's many big trees, the site, and pretty beautiful surroundings. So we want to bring the nature inside. So we put a big like windows.